Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Council Committee of the Whole. It's March 18th at just about 6 p.m. Eddie, would you call the roll?
Cobb.
Here.
Kuda.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Larson. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Russell. Boyd. Here.
All right, please excuse Davita Russell. She's tending to her sick mother. So today we have the Archer Group, a representative from the Archer Group here to talk about a compensation study that the mayor has asked for. The representative is Jim Battaglia.
Battaglia. Right.
And you're way down there at the other end. But I'm glad you're here and you have something for us.
I do.
Okay.
And I have 6 copies, and Danny has one from before. So I will pass these around.
And would you tell us what your position is at Archer?
I'm actually the president of the company as of this past fall. So it's a new role for me. Been with the company for 30 years. So you ready?
We're ready.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Jim Battaglia, and I'm with the Archer Company. I won't go into detail on every page on here, but I'll try to keep a highlight as to what the project is about, what are our major steps, and what are the project tasks that we'll ask city employees to go through, and then come back to you for decision-making and direction for the project. On the second page is just a little bit about the Archer Company, services we provide, and our 3 main services are in the red stars there. We develop compensation systems for governments, we develop pay classification plans, and we also have a performance appraisal system that we utilize. I'm going to have you go to page 3. Again, there's a little bit more background. The Archer Company has been in practice for 35 years now. If you've got history in government, we initially were David M. Griffith and Associates that developed cost plans for governments. We then merged into a firm called Maximus, and we were the HR practice of Maximus. And now we're back to where originally was the Archer Company. We've used the same systems, the same procedures through each gyration of those corporate names. Up until this past fall, we were headquartered out of Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is Charlotte. We have additional offices in Asheville, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, and Omaha. So I like to say we are a small firm, but we have national scope with our work and the projects that we conduct. Our primary focus is developing classification plans for nonprofits and governments in the public sector. To date, in our 35 years, we've developed more than 1,500 pay plans in 36 states. So we have a lot of experience conducting studies that Cleveland Heights is just starting to do. On the next page, I'll be your project director. The other folks will be people that will be working with me. Margaret Richwagon is a project consultant. Margaret is in Asheville, North Carolina. She used to be the assistant HR director in DeKalb County outside of Atlanta. Marianne Orias will also be working with me. Marianne and I have worked together for about 30 years, so we have a lot of history together. Amy Lee, which is our project specialist, she's in Omaha, and she and I have worked together for 15 years. So you've got a senior group of people who have worked together for a long time, which in today's world, that's very unique, with people changing jobs a lot. On the next page is a list of comparable projects that we've conducted. We started with cities, so I just actually started a comparable study in Perrysburg, which is a suburb of Toledo. We just started that 2 weeks ago. Last year, I completed a study for Solon. We have worked with Westlake, Ohio for 5 years. I've updated we do management studies for them. Updated that twice. We did a study for Beechwood, Ohio. We have worked with Carmel, Indiana, if you're familiar what, and as I like to say, who Carmel is, which they're very proud to say who they are. I've worked with them for over 20 years. Westfield, Indiana, which is just north of Carmel. We develop plans and continue to work with Cleveland Metro Parks and Zoo. We developed the pay plan for Rita that I see you were members of. And then finally, our longest contract client is Cuyahoga County that we have worked with for 30 years. And that's through multiple updates, charter form of government. We have worked with them for a long time. Any questions on the clients? Most of our clients are east of the Mississippi, but our focus, again, is a lot in Ohio, in the Carolinas. We have developed plans for 3 of the big counties in Atlanta, Fulton, Cobb, and DeKalb counties. And then we do quite a bit of work down in New Orleans. I try to pick cities I want to go to. So on the next page, on page 6, is starting into what is a compensation system. And when we develop our plans for most all our studies, they're twofold. Number one, we want to evaluate and assess your jobs to create internal equity. How do the jobs rank and compare to each other? And then establish external equity. How do you compare to the external market? And that will be based on Cleveland Heights' definition as who is the comparable market. Every organization has a different set of comparable organizations for us to compile that data. On page 7 is kind of a overview of what our studies consist of. Number one, we're going to work with you first and find out what is your plan here in Cleveland Heights? How do you operate your class plan, compensation practices you may administer? We then compile job analysis, and I heard you've started the process. Number one is we have a questionnaire we ask employees to complete, and you've started that process now. Employees don't like to fill it out. It's fairly comprehensive, but it's what we need and use to evaluate jobs. So we will go through the data gathering and analysis. We'll also interview your department directors to get further information on departmental operations, their challenges, issues with recruitment and retention. Once we have completed that process, we then evaluate the jobs using our job evaluation system, and I've got information on that in the handout. That then gives us a draft initial ranking of all the jobs. We will submit those to the city and get your input. And we bring that, we have a meeting, I've got all the questionnaires on my computer, and we work through any questions the city may have on how did this job get to be rated higher than this job? We've always had it reversed, and we really get into detail on how the jobs are evaluated. While we are doing that component of it, we are then working with the second phase, which is establishing external equity. And so we'll work with you on what are the organizations to survey. And basically, we're talking suburban cities in Metro Ohio. Somewhere between 15 and 20 cities we'll collect salary data on. We'll work with you on what are the set of benchmark jobs that we're going to collect data on. We'll get into more of that later in a few pages down. We will compile all of that information. We again will submit it to the city and let you look at that and get your input on it. We then, through our software, we integrate the internal equity with the external equity to develop your pay plan. And again, these are city decisions that have to make. There's not a right way, there's not a wrong way. There's not the same way that we develop every pay plan. We develop it based on what will work for Cleveland Heights. We then will collect all of your payroll data. We'll assign every employee to a job title, a pay grade, a salary range, and then we work with you on how do you implement this new pay plan. So going into more detail then, you're going through the process right now of having the employees complete the questionnaires. Everything's electronic. We ask the direct supervisors to review them, the department directors, and we really try to stress the fact that what's in those questionnaires is what we're going to use to evaluate the jobs. If I've got a project right now down in Georgia where the jail administrator, and you can imagine what that job entails, his explanation of the job was, I administer the jail. Well, that doesn't tell us anything. I mean, fortunately, we do enough of these. We kind of know what a jail administrator does. But the more information we get, the better we can evaluate the jobs. So we ask supervisors and department directors to review them. And if people don't say much about their job, send it back to them and tell them, give us more information. The next phase of that is we'll ask the city to organize the department director interviews. And I can do those, and I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I can come up here and interview in person, or we can do team meetings, Zoom meetings, whatever works for the city. We then like to collect your organization charts to help us with the ranking of the positions. And we like to get your current description. So what we do in the beginning of the project, actually we've already done it, is we create a Google Docs folder, and then that's where Tanya can deposit all the information, save all the questionnaires, and we work back and forth through that Google Docs. So we've got shared information between us. On page 10, again, it's a little bit more about the process. The job evaluations, again, based on information in those questionnaires, will be evaluated based on information in the questionnaires. We've been doing this long enough that we can look at certain titles, look at the tasks, and go, boy, this is kind of inconsistent for this job title. We may come back to you and say, is this questionnaire accurate? So we've done this long enough, we can kind of look for exceptions. And again, I'll have a slide explaining what our evaluation system is. And then I'm going to have you go to page 11. And this is an explanation of what our evaluation system is. Again, the information is based on what's in the questionnaires. We have what we call 3 work requirements. And these are consistent with all jobs: data utilization, human interaction, equipment, materials, and supplies. And then we have predefined definitions for each one of those work requirements. And we look at the task in the questionnaire, and then we associate them with a level of data utilization. And that doesn't mean much if you've never done it, but they're words such as, I compile and calculate data, I analyze data, I evaluate data, I manage data. So we're looking for what are those tasks, what are the essential functions, and what level does it meet? We do the same thing for human interaction, and some of those buzzwords are, I exchange information one-on-one, I'm a lead worker, I'm a first-line supervisor, I manage a large group of employees, I'm the department director. So again, we look at what's in the questionnaire and then see what that equates to the best. Under equipment, materials, and supplies, which again is another work requirement, we ask information in the questionnaires. We have some standard criteria that we use for administrative jobs that are consistent, but then we have to go look at those jobs that are public safety nature, require firearms, street departments, utilities, and we have a different set of criteria for those types of jobs. So we have one criteria for administrative, and then all those that work outside of the admin buildings. And the red letters are our aptitude factors, and these are considered more like human aptitude factors. They're verbal skills, mathematical skills, physical requirements of the job, decision-making, reasoning, education and experience. At the very end is the environment that you work within. Are you in the administration building? Do you have much communication with the public? Or are you in public safety and you're out there working with a lot of unknown? You don't know what you're going to approach each time. And then that gives us a subtotal of work requirements and aptitude factors, and then we increase those for responsibility factors. We define responsibility factors of what's your position in the organization? Are you a line worker, a team leader, supervisor, director? What type of planning is involved with your position? And then finally, what type of financial accountability does your position have? And on those, we really do like to work through and say, what is your responsibility? So department directors obviously get responsibility for their department budget, but then do you go down below that position? Or is it really stop at the department director? So those are things that we'll work through with you and see where you control the budget. And then we increase in points. Every job will have evaluation points. We increase the work requirements and the aptitudes by those responsibility factors. And the result of that can be, you could have, let's say, 2D directors that have the same work requirements and aptitudes, but one director is responsible for a $10 million budget, another one has a $100 million budget, and they're going to be in different pay grades. So that's part of what the responsibility factors do. The end result of this, and we'll have you go to page 12, and it's blurry, is a photograph of what our evaluation system looks like. So there are work requirements on the left side. There's aptitude factors along the top. There's responsibility factors in those top 3 squares. And then we get a numerical number of points for every job. And then we will group jobs into different job evaluation points. And we have a standard, but we'll work with you and let you see what it looks like, and we can change it to meet what you all want. One of the benefits of ours, and Dr. Archer, who developed this, who I always like to tell people, was a real person. He passed away a few years ago. But the result of our plan is you will get a single dollar value for every evaluation point. So if you're interested in equal pay for equal work, you can say every job evaluation point in Cleveland Heights plan is worth, I'm just making this up, $76.50. Whether you're the custodian to the director, everything's the same. And I've had to testify in court before on this basis, is it discriminatory or not? We can say, no, it's not. Every job evaluation point is worth the set dollar, same dollar amount.
Tim,
So-
I just wanted to make sure that about 5 more minutes, and then we're going to do questions.
Oh, okay, I'll go fast then.
I should have told you this.
So the second phase, again, is our salary survey. As I said before, we'll work with you on establishing who's the competitive market, and then we'll pick benchmark jobs. Benchmark jobs, we want to be consistent in other government. If you have unique jobs, we don't want to include those. We want jobs that we can collect data on in other governments. I'm going to have you go to page 15. And this is, so when we develop the plan, we use linear regression analysis. And this is a sample of what it looks like. We have evaluation points along the bottom, salary survey along the y-axis. This equates to an algebraic equation. And then we work with you on what will your plan look like once we have a regression completed. On the next page is a graph that kind of gives a quick view. We have salary survey data, we have job evaluation points, we integrate it through our regression analysis, and we compile the pay plan. And we'll work with you again on how many pay grades you want and what is the width of your salary range. It's very common in the industrial Midwest that they use a 40% spread. When we're doing plans in the South, they'll use 50% spreads, sometimes 55% spreads. So we can work with you on, once we get all this information together, once we see where your employees are right now, do we want to go with 40% or change that? Again, there's not a right way or wrong way.
Mr. President.
Yeah, please.
When you say spread, do you mean within a salary grade?
Yes.
Okay.
What's your minimum rate and what's your maximum? And some of the things that's going on right now is I've got some clients that say, given the way the market is and unemployment's down, they want to bring the minimum closer to the midpoint. So that makes their minimum rates more competitive. So those are things we work with when we get to that point. One of the items we'll work with you on is what will be your compensation philosophy. Most organizations in Ohio will say, do this work, get your regression, and then place our plan to meet 100% of the market. We want to be at the market. If you're Carmel, Indiana, they'll say, do the work, give us the market, put us 10% above the market because we're Carmel. So, I mean, those are things that we work with you on. Sometimes we get clients that we hit 100% of the market and they say, yeah, it looks good, but we don't have that money. So I can bring it down and say, well, here's what it looks like at 90%. And our software lets us recalculate this very easily and give you different costing numbers. Once we get to that point, we'll work with you and we'll, as I said before, we'll get all of your payroll data. We'll assign every employee, and then we'll say, all right, now our first costing is going to be, what's the cost to bring all employees into the pay grades, the minimum pay grade? If that isn't much money, then clients will say, okay, well, let's look at placing people into the salary ranges based on criteria. And they also want us to assess and say, tell us where pay compression is. And so part of our employee data we get is we like to get what is their date at the city and what's their date in the position. And we're doing a lot of this type of work right now. I'm doing a project like this for the county right now. Do we have a lot of people that have been with the city for 15 years and they're still down by the minimum? But yet here's some people that have been with the city for 3 years, they're past the midpoint. How do we address that type of thing? So we'll compile those and we can work with you on how to address that, but that's also where your money you can go through money very easily like that. But again, it's something in the last 3 years, most all of our clients have wanted us to do. So again, that's something we can do when we get to the end of the project. All of that ties into the final cost implementation. So number one would be, what's the cost to bring everybody to the minimum? And then based on your financial constraints, what would be the cost moving people into ranges based on a set of criteria? We're not doing descriptions for you all, so that's not part of this project. You all have those. And then usually what happens when we get to this stage, the city likes me to then come back and meet with department directors again, and I'll review their department with them and they can give us input on, I think Jane or John should be this classification, or are you sure this job can't be bumped up a pay grade, or whatever the case may be. And I'll bring those back to you all's attention before we get to that final report. And then we put everything together and we give you the final report and you've got your pay plan. We maintain a lot of plans where we charge $200 per job evaluation post-implementation. We can also give you at no cost we combine employer pay increases and the CPI. We add those together and say, we would recommend you adjust your ranges by blank percent. And we can do that for you each year at no cost. And with that, that's our plan.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes,
Council?
timelines.
So we have in here 4 months to get to the draft report, and then 1 month to work with the city with that draft report to get to a final report, which should put us into August to have the final report.
Thank you.
Does your analysis take into account any benefits that come with the job, such as health insurance, participation in pension?
Our proposal is looking at base salary, and I can tell you that I've done them before for benefits. In Ohio, we're all state mandated kind of benefits that it isn't that different from one, not unless you're gonna pay for the employees' participation into PERS. Do you really get much of a difference as to why somebody would leave one government to another? Now, they're not gonna leave because they get 3 days more vacation or something. It's pretty consistent in Ohio.
Follow-up question, then is your analysis limited to a comparison of other governmental entities then?
Absolutely. And then we supplement it. We buy the Economic Research Institute, and I will get their, based on the benchmarks, I can usually pick 12 to 15 jobs. I use data for all industries, and I add that to the governmental data as far as total comparisons. So when you get into the IT jobs or engineering, I like to have that external data also. And we'll show you and let you know up front, is there any one organization that's a lot greater than the rest, or is anyone really below the market, so that you all know?
So following up on Councilman Cobb's question about benefits, we do know, I mean, the benefits generally are the same, but not what, employees pay in. Some of the rules like cover, employees, spouses, for instance, and that kind of thing. And those kind of decisions, with 400, 500 employees, it's significant. So you say you don't weigh in on that. This is all about salaries.
It wasn't, yes, we do studies where we collect all that information, but we really weren't asked to do that.
Nice. Okay. Other questions? I have a couple more. So does your study take into account any kind of economic forecasts nationally or even locally?
Well, what we can do, and again, if implementation is for July 1, 2025, I can go in and increase that pay line to adjust for the next year's cost of living, so that, if you don't do anything, you're gonna have what they call a lag policy.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you wanna meet the market, we can go in and adjust for, again, looking at ECI and CPI, let's adjust for 4% or 4.5% for the next year, so that you have more competitive salary ranges going into the following year.
So no need to worry about this analysis being done in a moment in time because it can be adjusted.
Absolutely.
On page 6, where you do talk about making the pay plan competitive, obviously you said with comparable, with the comparable market study, what our market is. do you make recommendations based on your knowledge of the budget that we have? Or just based on,
The nature of the cities. Now, we'll get in and look at populations. We'll see what we can collect on average income for those cities. Some places like us to get into, if we can get the information, what percent of the population has bachelor's degrees? What's the average value of every home? I mean, we can get into some of that information. It typically doesn't have that much to do with when we're compiling the data, because that gets into the organizations that we're choosing, which again would be suburban organizations in Metro Ohio.
is, I can't, I almost have to not laugh when I say this, but is part of your studies, the mayor and council salaries?
That's up to you all. We obviously collect that. I mean, we can collect it. I'll say council is the most inconsistent because a lot of governments pay almost like an annualized salary for it, and other ones it's going to be $16,000. You know, it's not as consistent. And actually the same thing for mayor, whether it's a strong mayor form of organization or is it, I don't want to say figurehead, but more political in nature for the job, and it doesn't pay that much.
We've had both recently.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I did want to note that, I don't know if you were aware of this, but my understanding was that Council Vice President Russell indicated a desire to have council included in the salary study.
Okay.
But I don't know if that was passed along effectively or not.
We can do that, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, she did. That's why I asked that question. Any other questions from council? Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go into executive session now. Councilman Cobb?
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to consider the sale or lease of city-owned property.
Second.
Ready, call the roll?
Cobb.
Aye.
Huda.
Aye.
Petrus.
Aye.
Larson. Aye. Maddox.
Aye.
Boyd. Aye.
Okay, we are back in committee of the whole and moving on with the agenda. The next thing on the agenda is legislative review. And I guess I will go through this. So the first piece is the resolution recognizing Alfonso Wilson, 66 years, as a mail carrier. I am going to be moving that up on the agenda at our regular meeting. And so I would appreciate a motion for that.
I agree. I'll make that.
Thank you. I just realized I should be flipping this instead of that. And then for first readings only, we have 37, 38, 39, 40, 41 are all first readings to put citizens on our committees, citizen advisory. Anybody have anything on any of these appointments? I know we had discussed some of this before in committee, administrative services. Okay, then we'll go to Mr. Move it right along here. 42, 2024. This is the road salt. And any questions on that? Yes.
This is a standard yearly thing that doesn't need to go back to committee.
Not if you don't want it to.
I'm
Yeah,
fine
this
with
is
it. Yeah.
absolutely standard and
Seems like for 2 years, we've always used this as the example of routine legislation, so. Then there's 43, 2024, authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Knowles Municipal Forestry to do a street tree inventory. Do you want to say anything about that, Mayor?
so it's an update to our inventory system. Let's see. There's a memo. So yeah, the council, we discussed this during the budget. Basically, we're updating our street tree inventory and maintenance plan. This is something, it's in our capital budget that we discussed at the end of last year, and we're just sort of moving forward with that now.
That's what a timeline on that, do they have here?
That I don't know. What we can do, so this is, if you'd like, I can make sure, did you want to hear this in committee?
No, I don't think so, because they went through budget and talked about it at the budget process, so I'm okay with it.
But I could have Dr. Andy, Dr. Boateng, provide you with some more detailed information about that. We'll pass that along to all of council.
Thank you.
All right, then we have second readings. The first one on second reading is 29, 2024, and that's the WXZ TIF agreement. Any questions on that? Mr. Hanna, I noticed on section 5 on page 3, it just says the school district shall receive a portion. Is there a reason why why the portion isn't actually defined?
Yes. Would you like to know what it is?
I would.
Because it's covered elsewhere in a lot of detail, both in the development agreement and in the compensation agreement. And that's why the end of that section says in accordance with the school compensation agreement, which lays
I
it out
see.
in granular detail.
Okay.
And that is an exhibit to the ordinance.
Did I see any questions from anybody else? Okay, Councilwoman Boyd, do you want to speak on 33, 2024? This is a resolution about Roper Lockbox, Inc.
Yes, thank you. It's the lockbox program that the mayor is creating with our first responders. So the only questions, and I apologize, I really hoped to have a meeting before today on this, just so we could educate the public better. But I ran out of time. So the only questions, and I sort of surveyed my neighbors about and talked about the legislation with them, and there were a couple questions. And so Bear, if you wouldn't mind, first they were interested in understanding where the lockboxes would be placed. And if there's been conversation around that, certainly there's concern. They love the idea, number one. But there was concern about access by, for perhaps people that may not have the best intentions. So they were interested in that. And so, but for the most part, there was a lot of interest. One of my neighbors is a caregiver for her husband who has Alzheimer's, and it was a very welcomed concept, given that situation, for instance. So, and also I have another neighbor who's chronically ill, and certainly another vote for yes, please bring it on. Where will the lockboxes go?
So I think without getting into too much detail, because it will be case specific.
Okay,
Obviously, this is a voluntary program.
Right.
So people, if they feel uncomfortable, can wait until they feel comfortable enough to provide that kind of access to their homes in the case of an emergency. I think the primary concern from first responders' perspective will be that the lockbox is accessible to them in the case of an emergency when things might be a little frantic, things might be rushed. So having the lockboxes in an inaccessible location
right.
is not really the, but in terms of the specific location, that I don't have at the top of my head, so I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay,
But we can, because I don't know that there is a particular non-negotiated with the homeowner or the tenant, whoever lives there,
right,
location that they would mandate. I don't believe that it's mandated in that way with such specificity that
sure,
you could negotiate it with the homeowner, whether it's, in the back, or in the front, or the side doors, whatever is the most easily accessible entryway to the home. And that may be different depending on the how the home is set up. Some people don't use their front doors at all. And so that's the sort of thing that they will negotiate with the homeowner on a case-by-case basis to
Okay.
ensure that whatever that location is, it's, it's important to consider the relative comfort level of the person, the occupier, but also the convenience and the utility of the lockbox to the first responders as well. Now, when it comes to sort of, access to it and safeguarding that kind of access, we can get you some specifics. The only thing that I can say right now is that, of course, our EMS and our paramedics and firefighters will keep these things with the utmost security and care to keep them from falling into the wrong hands. But in terms of specifics on security, I'll get back to you on that.
okay. And then have you asked, the second question was, how, will they be able to sign up sort of the way some of them have signed up to get their trash and recycle cans picked up and taken back, you know what I mean? So they wondered how would they sign up for the program eventually?
I think our expectation is that the senior center would be a central point for applying for this program, but I imagine that reaching out directly to fire, you may be able to
Okay.
get that service as well.
Okay,
But I will say this, if anybody's having any trouble, once this is in place, if council chooses to move forward with this, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to the Mayor's Action Center if there are any, hassles or hangups around getting plugged into that program.
and so then finally, I would assume that there will be a good launch, so to speak, and so there would be information on the website on how to sign up, and there'd be information on.
Absolutely, and we
Yeah.
will be directly pushing this out as well, making, liberal use of our Commission on Aging to
Right.
spread the word, and our senior center to spread the word, AARP locally
Right.
as well to spread the word, in addition to all the mechanisms that we use to communicate.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So with that, unless there are other questions, I think we should move forward with it. I small group conversations in the community have been very favorable and
Sure. I mean, it's on second reading and I haven't heard any objections.
And it's budgeted.
yep,
It is
it is budgeted, correct. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, 34, 35, and 36 were read on March 4th. The cost overrun was discussed as compensated for by one coming in quite a bit under the budgeted allotments so that it balanced out or close to balanced out. Any questions on those? 34, 35, 36. Okay, and then we have the consent agenda with everything from poetry to National Poetry Month, Fair Housing Month, World Autism Awareness Day, and National Library Week. The only thing I was thinking was, maybe we get that, what do you guys think about getting the Poet Laureate in for one of our meetings in April to celebrate National Poetry Month?
Sounds like a
Because
good plan.
we only see her, on other occasions outside maybe. So with your permission, I will ask. Okay, so that is the legislative agenda. And then where are we now? All right, so legislation, so Councilwoman Larson, you have a resolution Does everybody have this resolution? Okay. Would you like to take it from here?
Just briefly, I did want everybody to know that I had asked several residents to weigh in on the proposed legislation. They've helped me with wording and construct and what we needed to, what I felt was relevant that we needed to press for at this point. They provided suggestions for the most appropriate wording to use as well. At the end of the day, I wanted to present you with a resolution with a message of unity that would not further divide our residents. This is for Cleveland Heights to be delivered to the federal government, but I hope I accomplished that.
Okay. And how would you describe this resolution as the top? What's the topic?
Well, we're talking about the council taking an action on the current situation in Gaza and determining what we would like to discuss or mention as action items as we got through the whereas documents or statements.
Okay, very good. Any comments from members? Councilman Maddox, please.
Yeah, just a few, and I want to thank Councilwoman Larson for working on this. As I've looked at it and also got some feedback from members of the community, I know there's some concerns about the real acknowledgement in terms of the two-state system there, and to make sure that we're on even keel in terms of the former statement that we put on in this. I got a lot of feedback about the fact that this was more centric in terms of bringing our community together versus acknowledging some of the things that are happening overseas. And so I didn't know if you received the same feedback from anyone. I didn't know if that was addressed after the fact, or I know we've gotten some emails in after this draft as well, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts on any of those.
Councilman, go ahead.
I think the second state situation that we did get some emails about today, that's gonna be a work in progress between the countries. And once we get to peace, it's not gonna happen until we get to peace. The war stops. So I didn't see that as part of this particular document.
And I look at it as it could feasibly be part of a negotiated ceasefire. I mean, I'm not saying it will be, but or it's something that could be a byproduct of it. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
But it's pretty granular stuff. I mean, as far as I think what you're trying to accomplish. Any other comments?
Councilmember Larson, I didn't think it was possible to come up with a resolution that the majority of this body would be comfortable discussing and passing, and I commend you for this effort. I think that you tried to be as balanced as possible in drafting something that all of us will vote for, because I think some of the other provisions that people have called for us to put into a resolution would not be satisfactory. So I thank you again for this.
Thank you, Councilor Cobb.
Yeah, that I would say the same. What would you like to see done now? Would you like to try to move this forward? If there's
Consensus.
Exactly.
Yes, consensus.
I just had one more question if I could.
oh, please.
So I know this, and I appreciate you, putting your heart out there to do this too. And I know it's not easy, and the last conversation we had, that was the concern I raised, is that you have to talk about it, and it's not an easy thing to talk about. So I wondered why we excluded, though, for instance, just the call for sort of a negotiated ceasefire and also a negotiated return of the hostages, right? So that seemed like some balanced language that was supported by
Yes.
both sides of the discussion. So I thought it would be relevant to include. What are your thoughts?
That is in there, right?
Yeah, they're both
Oh,
in there.
I missed it, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I've been looking at the
Yeah, section 1.
former President Hart sent to, so I might be getting my draft confused.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh, so now.
Yeah, let me read section. Okay.
I was looking at the wrong draft, my apologies. There was, I think I had 4 other
Yeah,
drafts.
there's gonna be these going around.
So my apologies. I'm glad that's there.
I don't know, I'm just meeting your eyes. Go ahead.
I guess my concern is still the level that we took with Israel in that first initial statement. For me, this feels really watered down compared to that statement now that we're addressing it in a much broader issue, and that's still my concern there. And I know that there are people in the community who are uncomfortable, so I know that's why some of the language is adjusted, but I still feel uncomfortable with leaning more towards the statement of unity without really fully acknowledging what has happened. We really did lean in with that first statement. There was a level of commitment and a level of compassion, I think, that this statement, I think, kind of leaves out in terms of some of the people that are being impacted. And so I would have to take a look at this and continue to get some feedback. But just based on what I've read and the discussions and taking a look at that original resolution that we did, I just feel like there's something missing there in terms of how we're leaning into the issue. But that's
You know, I understand that, but I really think they're so two different moments in time. I mean, the war had, the first resolution was put together, I think, 4 or 5 days after the attack on October 7th. And, you know, the war had really been prosecuted at that time. And now there's, you know, a lot has happened since. And so I think part of the reason that you see a different approach is not just, you know, to be, you know, watered down, as you say, but to try to bring unity, as opposed to, at the time, just sympathy on the attack itself. And so I hear what you're saying, but I don't know that you could compare this moment in time quite the same way as that moment in time. And I think Councilwoman Larson has really tried to do a very difficult task that wasn't, I don't think, as difficult of a task, you know, for council, saying at that time.
Mr.
Please, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying. I still feel like this council with this resolution and the way we're discussing this now, we're doing it in such a way that still appeases or comforts a group of individuals who had no problem marching in here and making clear demands of us, both through emails and in council meetings. And now it seems like we're easing back to a point where we're trying to make them feel more comfortable now while we're acknowledging an entirely different group of people. And that's my concern. I still think that we need to have the same level of energy and acknowledgement and acceptance for all people. And I feel like right now we're trying to play it safe so that we're not upsetting people instead of just speaking truth to power. And that to me is a problem. I don't want to make any resolution that makes people feel comfortable. That's not the goal. The goal is to acknowledge what's happening and speak truth to it, no matter how it makes people feel comfortable. I think this resolution and the way it's written, how this council is discussing this, I think puts us in a very safe position. But I don't think it necessarily acknowledges that all of our residents are on the same keel. And that's my concern. And from how I'm looking at this, to be clear, I removed the two groups of people that we're talking about, and in my mind, I replaced them with any other race of people. And I think if we did that same thing at this table, we would still see this is problematic. I think to lean in like we did and acknowledge a group of people at that time, and now to see that even more lives are lost on both sides, and then to take a more safe approach because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, I think diminishes the true and real feelings and impact it's having on the lives of others. I think we shouldn't be working to make any one group feel comfortable while we're acknowledging what's happening with another, and that seems to be where we are. And that's my concern. And I recognize that in the city of Cleveland Heights, we have a very large Jewish population, but I wouldn't care if it was only one Palestinian living here. They're still a resident. And it feels like the groundswell of support or the emails that we're getting or the push that we're getting or the PR that we're getting is causing us to make changes. To give you an example, I've been on this council for 2 years, 3 months now. I haven't heard from anyone in many of these major Jewish organizations, but magically over the last 2 weeks, everyone wants to go to coffee with me and talk about this and talk about these feelings. But but never any other topics or never any other subject. But when it looked like I was actually going to have a conversation at this table, magically everybody wanted to go to coffee. They no one wanted to talk to me when this table was silent. But now it looks like there's some type of movement. Now people want explanations. They want to see what we're doing. They want to have conversations about my reelection. So that's my concern. I'm on the same emails that the rest of this council has, and my concern is that we've taken some threats or we've taken some I'm going to remember you on election day, and we've somehow marginalized a group of people so that we all feel safe and comfortable. And that's not why I'm here. I think from a social justice standpoint, you have to remove other people's feelings when you're trying to acknowledge a group of people at any point. And I just want to make sure that anything that we put out doesn't diminish any group of people because we want to make another group of people feel more comfortable in our community. I just don't.
Well, I think you made yourself clear. I think that a laudable goal is to try to bring the community together. And I don't know that in and of itself is a diminishment. Go ahead.
I'd like to firstly thank Councilwoman Larson for putting in the hard work to try to draft this up and for trying to gather feedback and try to earn support for this. I am uncomfortable with the characterization that there are only Jewish groups pressuring us as council members. In reality, we are being pressured by a lot of people.
I'm not.
And I think that it's important to note that even our own mayor reached out to a well-known local political group and asked that they pressure council members, in essence, and saying that they will be watched and their actions will be noted. Okay, so I think that it's not fair for us to just cast this as, us sort of bowing to anyone, and in particular, just to the Jewish community, when in reality, there are a lot of different people who are pressuring us.
Mayor, you want to say something?
Sure, yeah. So let's maybe, while we're doing the business of the city, it would be, great to sort of keep electoral politics out of it. We all seek endorsements from various entities. And then in those instances where there's a conversation about what an endorsed candidate does once they get the position, that's fair game. And so I encourage, as a new politician, I encourage you to keep that in consideration when you go for endorsements of various organizations that may have particularized expectations of their endorsed candidates. Aside from the politics of the situation and then moving back to the content of this particular resolution and what it might accomplish, I'm not sure, I understand that the whole purpose was to help to bring the community together. I think that that's a laudable goal generally. So I don't want to take anything away from that. I did note, and this was based on, I think everybody got Mr. Herzig's email about the two-state solution. And I did note the point that I found most interesting about that he brought up was that the United States policy generally is in favor of a two-state solution. Now, I did want to call back to the initial resolution that council passed, and it included a section that supports and commends the federal government and the Biden administration in their support of Israel against all terrorist attacks and threats to Israel's existence and security. At this point, we are in the middle of March. And since then, tens of thousands of people have died. And the vast majority of those people are civilians. A huge portion of those people are children. And when I say children, I mean children in the same way that I would view people in this community as children when they're minors. I know that there is a push to stop thinking of people in that way. And so I think I have a similar concern about what we hope to accomplish, which is bringing the community together, and that what we might end up accomplishing, which is simply alienating the people who wanted council to clarify its position. I recognize that even placing something about a negotiated ceasefire could potentially be an act of bravery in the environment that we're in, where any deviation or nuance in a discussion can be demonized. But I think it's difficult. We talked about thousands of people dying in a terrorist attack. And I thought it was important to make that statement and declare our support. I think that, you know, like I said before, I think our hearts were in the right place, right? And, you know, that's going to be a theme. But at the same time, it is not completely unreasonable or irrational to view Section 6, where we are supporting and commending our federal government in, say, the provision of military aid that is being used in a way that has led to the deaths of thousands upon thousands of children, and calls for adherence to international law, are being met with, you know, accusations of bigotry. I've got real concerns that if council puts something forward that doesn't clarify at least that portion, that we want our federal government to proceed in a way that commits to our ideals, that we want our federal government to proceed. If we're going to be transmitting this to the federal government, just wishing for everybody to come together around a table and hold hands may not be the message. And so Again, I appreciate the work, and I know that doing what you did and writing that in and of itself can be a difficult thing in this environment. And so I want to express my appreciation for that, but I also want to express that, again, you know, as with the last resolution, there's what we hope to accomplish, and then there's what we actually accomplish. And I think that we should be cognizant of the fact that the last time we had some discussion around this and moved forward with something, we thought we were going to be accomplishing one thing. And I think in this case, we might want to take a hard look at saying some uncomfortable things. You know, we did reference thousands of people dying. We are not, I don't believe, doing the same or providing the same treatment when we're talking, you know, but I can't even, 30 times the number at this point. So I can understand why I've gotten some of the emails that I got in response to this saying, we're not being clear enough. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not going to pretend like I do. But I think that it's important maybe to think about what we're asking of our federal government. If this is something that we're intending to send to our federal government, what is the policy that we hope to achieve here? I think generally as Americans, as people who have gone through all kinds of pretty horrific things, both not generally on our soil as well. We have a long history of, you know, possibly participating in atrocities around the world. And this is something I think we need to be a little bit more cognizant of as we take another step in this discussion as an official act, that international law and not killing civilians is sort of a generally applicable ideal that I hope we all share. And there are major problems with our government providing the materials with which another government is killing innocent civilians.
So it's tough to say, you know, we support our government and the two-state solution, but we don't support our government, you know, supplying weapons. This is the problem with getting into that level of you know, kind of granular stuff. I mean, what would you like to see happen next? Is there support for moving this forward? If not today, the next time, do you want to? So is anybody offering amendments? Go ahead, Councilman Patrick.
I could support this. And as you just sort of noted, anyone can offer an amendment, and then we could vote on whether to include it. And then also the mayor is able to introduce a resolution of his own if he would like.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, thank you. I just wondered, had you thought about, I don't remember the student's name that graduated from the high school as well. Somehow identifying her by name
Well,
and.
we just generally spoke to the families that have lost loved ones because there are so many.
Sure. I
So-
just, because she's a Cleveland Heights graduate. We thought about that.
So I would like to say something.
Sure.
With the concerns that you have and the mayor, we could do a couple things, I think. Either we just revisit it the next meeting that we have and you provide some amendments that you feel would strengthen it. We move it to first reading only, and with the same intent that we could look for amendments that would come in between now and April 1st. That's where I'm at right now. I'm not, with the kind of concerns that I've heard.
Right. And I hate to say this, but due to the time, we need to decide.
Yeah.
Real quickly,
Yeah,
please.
sure. So I think in response to Councilman Petrus's comment about the mayor can introduce pieces of legislation, I'd like to remind everybody, I've been consistent this entire time, that on something like this, where we are seeking to legislatively provide the will of the city government and the council specifically.
Yeah.
I don't think it's appropriate for the mayor to introduce some sort of competing resolution or something like that. And as I did with the initial resolution, I was invited to participate. I provided a bit of input into what I thought might be appropriate in that, and signed on when I saw the end result. But in this case, I think I've been consistent as well, letting council know I am happy to take a look at what council determines to put forward if it does. And if invited, and if I look at the ultimate thing that would be introduced, I can provide my input from my perspective and then sign on if it's something I agree with. But from a resolution perspective, I think this is appropriately legislatively led.
And I could support this, and I do appreciate the work you did. I think again, a very difficult task. But since there might be some additions the next time, or at least, we could bring it back. And but are we really going to offer? Are people going to come with something? Because I'd like to do that if. Councilman Maddox, are you?
Is this your way of saying if we don't bring in something, you're just gonna push it through anyway?
No, I'm not saying that.
Clear, because it's the tone of this and how we've been moving.
I think people who are critical should bring in something, and I don't have a problem with the critical part, but I think that what needs to accompany that is, here's what we ought to do.
Then I think it's fair to make a statement when anyone else at this table besides Councilwoman Larson brings something to this table that it not be met with silence then and we actually discuss it. Because there was nothing happened at this table when that happened. Then the second time, when I brought Mr. Herzig in, there was barely any conversation. So we're not going to, I just want to make sure that we're not setting this idea where things aren't moving because, well, no one said anything, so this is all we had, because that's been the attitude that we've had. So I don't have a problem bringing amendments. But just know, anything that comes to this table, I expect to be discussed, not stared at while I'm talking to myself, because that's what's been happening.
People.
So I just don't want to describe as if no one else has brought anything to this table to be discussed, and that's how we end up where we are.
I'm going to
So
assume.
I don't have a problem bringing in amendments, Mr. President.
Yeah.
But I would expect them to be discussed the same way we did tonight.
I assume when people don't say anything, they don't have anything to offer. I'm just asking, if you have something to offer, we'd be glad to hear it next time.
There's also been an assumption that if someone doesn't email something ahead of time at this table, that they can't just present it here either. So there's been a lot of assumptions about how we communicate
All
amendments
right,
to legislation.
well, that's what we'll do then.
Sounds good to me.
We'll table it till
Thank you.
till April 1st meeting. And again, thank you, Councilwoman Larson, for all the work you did on this. It is very thoughtful and sensitive, and I think you put your best foot forward. Council budget requests. I'm just asking here, and this won't take 5 minutes, but I would like everybody to, as you think of things that you like, wow, we really need to budget for that next time, let's send these to Addie, whether it's the council budget or, the larger budget. And this way we can keep, and it'll be under your name, and this way we'll have, over the next, say, 6 months is when we start kind of talking about the budget. We'll have those ideas, and we won't be like just looking at the budget book and just and reacting to that we'll actually have some things that we want, because the mayor does ask us at some point, what would you guys like to see in the budget? And I don't know about you, but if I'm not writing it down as I go, or if there isn't a central place, and I would very strongly, I'm not ordering this, obviously, I don't have the power to do that, but I would very much like to see all of us send Addie those budgeting ideas.
President Kuda?
Yes.
I would ask that I be CC'd on that, because as finance chair, I would like to call a meeting to discuss the council budget. We didn't put that together, and then when the directors are being asked to put their budgets together, I would like to start our process as well, so.
I couldn't agree more. I think the finance committee is the exact right place for that, and perhaps we could have some kind of clearinghouse discussion at the appropriate time.
Definitely.
All right, moving on. Other, is that where we are? We have a committee of the whole meeting, 10 o'clock on Wednesday. And the purpose of that meeting is to discuss a legislative process and council rules. I would just like everybody to show up, ready to contribute. I had put something, a one-pager on the legislative process. I got the feeling we were kind of close on that. Council rules, maybe not, we haven't gone quite so far, but I mean, I'd really like to start making decisions, if we could kind of approach that meeting on Wednesday as that's what we're gonna try to do. It's again at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, 10 to 12. Hopefully we can start making decisions on those two items. And wow, we're like 3 minutes over, so that's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. So we will adjourn this meeting at 7:33. Thank you.